Evan wanted to get my car keys, and he wouldn't let me go back in and get my car keys. I said, well, I got to get to the hospital. He goes, well, I said, I got to tell you something. He sat me down and gave me the bad news. Yeah, I had a pretty big emotional breakdown there at the time, no doubt.
Now this,
I remember sliding down the wall outside of my townhouse, laying in the grass. He left me to myself for a few minutes.
Elizabeth Ann Hulette, better known by her ring name Miss Elizabeth, was born in Frankfort, Kentucky on November 19, 1960. She is best known in the world of professional wrestling as the First Lady of Wrestling, and she truly was. In the early part of the 1980s, Hulette worked at International Championship Wrestling as a TV announcer, and this is where she would meet the Macho Man Randy Savage, who, of course, as we all know, would become a massive part of Miss Elizabeth's life. The two were married in 1984, and when Randy Savage debuted in the WWE in 1985, he brought in Miss Elizabeth to be his manager. The two shared so many amazing and memorable moments from the mid to late 80s and into the early 90s. So many great feuds and storylines were based around Randy Savage and Miss Elizabeth. Feuds with Hulk Hogan, Jake the Snake Roberts, Dusty Rhodes, and the list goes on. Miss Elizabeth and the Macho Man truly were fan favourites. Randy did have a reputation of being overprotective of Miss Elizabeth, but mainly because he knew how dangerous it could be for someone like Miss Elizabeth in the wrestling business. No, it isn't all beer and skittles, and he saw Miss Elizabeth as someone that he needed to protect. In 1992, after 8 years of marriage, the two divorced. Unpleased with his position in the WWE, Randy Savage left for WCW in late 1994, and Miss Elizabeth would follow suit, arriving in the company in 1996. And even though the two were divorced now, Elizabeth, or Liz as she was sometimes known in WCW, did start working together again in the NWO, with Elizabeth becoming Randy's manager once again. And so we come to the year 1999 in WCW, and with Randy only being a part-timer in the company at this point, Elizabeth found herself doing her own thing, and she found herself going into a storyline with the Total Package Lex Luger. Luger and Elizabeth were both in their own marriages at the time. However, while working together, the two became quite close, and their working relationship now turned into a real one. Colleagues would ask Luger if there was something going on between him and Elizabeth, and his good friend Sting would even confront him on the issue. Elizabeth would get a divorce from her second husband in 1999, and the relationship with Luger continued, even though Luger was still married with children at the time. WCW disbanded in 2001, and by this time Luger was abusing prescription pills and alcohol. Luger and Liz were still together at this point. However, Luger's wife did find out about Luger's affair, but gave him another chance. However, the affair between Luger and Liz still continued. Elizabeth herself at this time found herself abusing pills and alcohol just as Luger was, and her life was starting to spiral out of control. There were allegations of domestic abuse in 2003. At this time, Luger was also charged over a DUI incident, with Miss Elizabeth in the passenger seat, and things all came to a head not long after this on May the 1st of 2003, when at Lex Luger's townhouse in Marietta, Georgia, Elizabeth's life was tragically lost.
I came back late that evening. We decided to watch a movie. I went down to back then, used to go to a movie store and rent movies at Blockbuster. We don't do that anymore, but back then, and I came back, and man, had to stay straight the whole day, and I was ready to party, and Liz had a party a little bit with me. She seemed like she was fine, and we watched a movie. She dozed off a couple times, but by then it was like 2 a.m., 3 a.m. I thought she was just tired, and I made a snack, some heat up a snack in the microwave, and she was hungry and actually stood up to come to the microwave with me and wanted to help. I said, "You go ahead and sit down. I'll bring it to you." And I brought her food. She took a couple bites out of it. I sat down on the couch a few feet away from her to eat my food, and she was passed out. I thought that was weird because why was she eating her food? And one thing led to another. I realized that she was unconscious, and I ended up calling 911. And I thought that they got there so fast. I thought she was fine, but I learned a couple hours later that she had made it to the hospital. It was a complete shock to me.
What were you guys, you said that you came back and you were partying. What were you partying with? I mean, what kind of drugs were you guys?
Alcohol and pills.
Alcohol and pills, like pain pills or that kind of stuff?
Pills, muscle relaxers.
Paramedics rushed Elizabeth to the Wellstar Kenstone Hospital emergency room, where she was pronounced dead at the age of just 42. A medical examiner listed the cause of death as acute toxicity brought on by a mix of painkillers and vodka. Her death was ruled an accident. Luger was arrested that night after a search of his home revealed a number of illicit controlled substances. He was charged with 13 counts of drug possession but was released the next day on bail. Many blame Lex Luger for this outcome, an outcome which you could now see as the exact thing that Randy Savage was trying to protect Miss Elizabeth from. With the news of Elizabeth's death clearly being public knowledge, Luger's wife, who had given him chances before, filed for divorce not long after the death of Elizabeth. In 2007, after suffering a nerve impingement in his neck, Luger became temporarily paralysed. Throughout the years he has needed a wheelchair, and by 2021 he has now become completely reliant on a wheelchair for mobility.
This is a decision I never thought I'd have to make. I hoped it would never come down to this.
Miss Elizabeth, a beautiful woman, a fan favourite in the WWE from the mid to late 1980s and into the 90s, she will be remembered in her legendary role that she played with the Macho Man Randy Savage. Randy, of course, himself passed away in 2011. A life truly ended too soon, and you can't help but feel that the way that it ended was completely avoidable. Elizabeth is buried in her hometown of Frankfort, Kentucky, at the Frankfort Cemetery there. A very tragic end indeed for the First Lady of Wrestling, Miss Elizabeth. Thanks heaps guys for tuning into the video. Be sure to drop a scorpion death drop on that like button and subscribe to the channel for more awesome pro wrestling action from the WWE, the WCW and much more.